Hello and welcome. I'm Michael Egel, General and Artistic Director for Des Moines Metro Opera. It's my pleasure to welcome you here today as part of our 2020 virtual festival season, produced in partnership with Iowa PBS.
She'll cut up a pilly for pie. She'll cut up a pilly for pie, cut up a pilly for pie. Oh, he's a cat of the eye, oh, he's a cat of the eye. Cut up a pilly for pie, cut up a pilly for pie, cut up a pilly for pie, cut up a pilly for pie. Magical cut me up for pie.
Our subject today is our 2017 production of Benjamin Britten's Billy Budd. Because of its large cast, chorus, and orchestra, as well as its immense scenic and production challenges, we've become accustomed to only seeing this opera on the world's largest stages. Coming up with a way that we at DMMO could reasonably tackle all of these challenges represented an effort many years in the making, and a dream come true for the production staff, our company, and for me. Today, I'm happy to be catching up with members of the cast, reminiscing about this very special experience, and hearing about what some of them have been up to since this production aired. Thank you all for joining us here today. It does my heart good to see all of you and to be with you again, if not in person, virtually. I'm going to start by introducing each of you and asking you to share with us one of your favorite memories of working on this production of Billy Budd. Let's start with our Billy Budd, baritone Craig Verm.
No, I tried to answer him back, my tongue wouldn't work. So I had to say it with a blow, and it killed him.
Thank you, it's great to be here. Billy Budd holds such a special place in my heart, and I know, and in the hearts of everyone who ever gets to experience such an incredible piece like this. One of the greatest things about doing a piece like this is exactly that, the camaraderie that is formed between the cast. There's a bond that is formed unlike in any other opera that I've been a part of, that you look back on and there's just this warmth, this glow that you remember that's formed in creating something so special. And as I'm here catching up with some of the cast, that feeling is just bubbling up inside of me of those memories of not only performing it, but creating it in all the rehearsals, and then reliving the memories and continuing a lot of the friendships that are created. It's really a special thing that continues to live on.
One of the reasons we were able to finally put this opera on the docket was that we had found someone to sing the challenging role of John Claggart. I'll never forget Zachary James's audition for us early on, and finding him meant we could do the show. So I introduced to you today Zachary James.
William Budd, you are a traitor to your country and to your king.
Hi, thanks for having me and great to see you all. Billy Budd was my first production with Des Moines Metro Opera, and I've gone on to do several more, 3 summers in a row. It's just been such a great place to call home every summer and cherished memories. But Billy Budd being the first, I'll just never forget how incredibly special it was to be in Iowa for the first time and to be introduced to the wonderful company that is Des Moines Metro Opera, and the patrons that come from all over the world to be there. We many times are on such big stages and so far away from the audience. And I think one of the most special things about this production was doing it in such an intimate venue and being so close to the audience. And it kind of, in a way, replicated kind of the sense of claustrophobia I think you might feel on a ship. And you could use that as an actor in a way to your advantage, just being so close to the audience and feeling like there's no escape, and just to feel people move to the edge of their seats and engage in a way that is impossible when there's 50 feet between the stage and the audience. So, and also that battle scene, I think Claggart is the only one that doesn't have a vocal entrance in the entire cast in the battle scene, and being a part of that scene regardless was a very special experience. And that was the scene I think we did the most in rehearsal, just on repeat. And just to be in the middle of that scene and surrounded by those glorious voices was really something I'll never forget.
Absolutely. I'll never forget it myself, being so close to it in the audience that it could just blow your hair back and shake you to the core, I think, with all those voices. One other reason that we were able to finally put Billy Budd on the schedule was discovering Roger Honeywell, who sang the role of Captain Vere, but first had his debut with us in 2013 in another production I won't forget, also by Benjamin Britten, Peter Grimes. So I'd like to welcome now Roger Honeywell, who was our Captain Vere. Roger.
Hi, thanks for having us all. It's so nice to see everybody's faces again. Yeah, going from Peter Grimes to Captain Vere was such a gift, and I have so many great memories of Billy Budd.
The mist is back to file us. The mist creeps in to blind us.
I think one of them, certainly throughout rehearsal, but there was also a real bonding moment when we were all at your house, actually, Michael, when we were watching Master and Commander. Sort of just to get us in the feel for that. That was great. I think one of the moments that always sticks with me throughout performance and in rehearsal actually is after the first scene in the cabin with Dennis, when the chorus starts to sing "Blow Away." It's such a swell, really beautiful, along with the battle scene, of course, but such great memories.
This production of Billy Budd was special in so many ways, and one of those ways is that we were able to welcome back Dennis Jesse, a baritone, to Des Moines Metro Opera as part of the cast. Dennis had previously sung with us in roles like Chermont and Valentine and Faust, and came back and appeared with us in 2017 in Billy Budd. It was very special. I'd like to welcome Dennis Jesse.
Thank you so much for having me today on this wonderful call. It's so great to see everybody. Billy Budd for me was such a lifelong goal to be in. I remember seeing it at the Met many years ago, and always wanting to be in the production.
Soldier, or other person of the fleet shall strike any of his superior officers, he shall suffer death.
So when DMMO called, I was thrilled to be a part of it. And then when I arrived and saw the caliber of the cast and the direction and the production, oh my gosh, I just have so many memories that I cherish from that show. Both the cabin scenes were very special for me, and the battle scene, gosh, when those drummers started. I usually had to hang on to the rail because I was almost becoming overwhelmed myself at all.
How well we all remember the drummers and that percussive sound. Again, another thing nailing us all back to our chairs in that small theater. Thank you, Dennis. Last, our final guest, Kristine McIntyre, stage director, who has directed numerous productions for us through the years. Our audiences and artists have come to know her work very well. It was her job to create the battle plan for how this production could be conceived of in such an unusual space from where one might be used to seeing it. So how you crafted a battle plan to layer 80 cast members and drummers and children and principal artists and chorus and auxiliary chorus all together into one very cohesive whole in a very small space. So welcome, Kristine.
Thank you. It's great to be back with everybody, back on the Indomitable. Yeah, I mean, the thing about that battle scene is that at the end of it, everybody is singing. But in the lead up to that, you have lots and lots of different groups, each announcing their arrival and talking about what they're doing and their part in the battle and getting ready. And actually, one of the challenges wasn't having too many people. In some ways, it was not having enough in some of those smaller groups that come and go. And it was about sorting out how we could best use all of our resources. And when Keith Bromley and I were creating the set, one of the things that I was really into was that it had to replicate the way people would get to the deck of the ship, which meant coming from underneath or from very small spaces, which meant there were just not a lot of entrances and exit locations for all of those guys to come from. And it took me a week of working 6 hours a day, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth in that scene, like literally charting what each and every single person was going to do and what group they were going to be part of, and making this big flow chart, and then somehow typing it out and handing it to Brian, our stage manager, and saying basically, good luck, sort it out. And he did. We assigned it all to the ASMs, and by the first time we rehearsed it in the room, actually, it sort of already had the shape of it. And one of the hardest things about Billy was that we rehearsed it in a room that was entirely too small for that many people, constantly. And I'll never forget having to stand on a chair pressed up against the windows at the back of the room in the hopes of surviving the battle scene, and also trying to get a look at what I'd staged. Because I'm short, everyone in the cast is really tall, and there were just so many of them, I could never see what was going on until I had some perspective on it. So it was a blessing once we finally got on stage and I had a little distance and could figure out what was going on. It brought its own challenges. But yeah, there aren't many scenes like that in opera. And once you figure out the key to them, they seem so obvious. But in the midst of it, there were moments when I thought, I think I've staged a catastrophe and we'll have to sort this out when we have more space.
Craig, I'd like to ask you to think back to the rehearsal room and your memories of getting to meet your shipmates for the first time. Can you describe what it was like getting to hear each other sing and getting to know one another?
Well, as we all know, opera takes not only just 3 weeks to get ready, or 4 weeks, but it takes years and years and years of preparation. My history with the piece, I learned Billy and the Darbies aria at the end. I learned that 20 years ago when I was in my undergraduate. And then I have a very special memory actually with the director Kristine from 2010. We were both working in Santa Fe, and I coached the aria with her. And that kind of, I think it created kind of a desire in both of us to maybe one day we'll get to do this together. And Roger and I, we were actually both in the Peter Grimes in 2013. And then we both immediately went from Des Moines to Santiago, Chile, and did Billy Budd there together. So we already had this bond formed through Britain and through The Indomitable. And we got to carry that bond back in 2017. So getting to stage in such a cramped space, actually in scenes like Billy and the Darbies, it had some benefit to it. There's this intimacy that is needed in that scene.
And that's enough.
I also will never forget staging things like the battle scene in that small space, but also getting to do the smaller scenes too. It's really remarkable experience. And hats off to Kristine for just having everything so perfectly planned. It couldn't have been an easier process because of all the work that she did ahead of time. It was an incredible experience.
What did they do in there? Get below decks.
Zach, I want to ask you, one of the things I'm struck by as I look back on the video, and others feel free to chime in on this as well. You move so effortlessly around that set with lots of places where one could get caught up easily, but you move so naturally and effortlessly through that space as if you'd owned it and had lived on it your entire life. I wanted to ask you about your process of just getting used to moving in the space the way that you did and what that was like for you.
Sure. We talked about the ship as a character throughout rehearsal, and I think it was really helpful to think of it that way from the beginning. And knowing that we were all on that ship for years and years, there had to be that familiarity. So I definitely spent some secret time on set when actors and singers weren't supposed to be on stage. So I really wanted to feel as though I knew every nook and cranny, because you would, if you were on that ship, you would know every hiding spot, you would know just every pathway to be able to use it to your advantage, especially a character like Claggart, who's sneaking around. And just some secret time on set, and then really being brave and trying not to fall. There's a lot of traps, literal traps, trap doors. So just being brave and, trusting that there was a supportive team surrounding all of us and that we were safe and could really go there.
I remember spending a lot of time myself just trying to get used to walking over that grate, because I felt like if the cast was having to do that, I should be able to do it too. And I practiced every day and never did quite get used to it. So my hat's off to all of you for that. Roger, how does doing a work like Billy Budd in an intimate venue such as the Blank Performing Arts Center inform the creation of your character, or how does it transform your idea of what a piece like this can be?
Oh, it was such a challenge, knowing that the audience is that close. In one way, it's a real gift, because it really focuses you to know that they're at times 3 feet away from you. It's almost like working in television or film. You have to have such an interior monologue going on all the time. You can't allow the space to take over. You have to be really, really tight. I was an actor before I started singing, and there was a theater that I spent a lot of time at the Shaw Festival in Niagara-on-the-Lake, and there's a theater very much like your theater called the Courthouse Theater, and so I have been used to that kind of proximity to an audience. So when I approached the role, I knew what type of space that I would be performing in. So I just imagined the entire time as if there were, the audience was right on top of you. It was also, after singing Peter Grimes there with you, it was the same experience. I knew exactly what that feeling was. And as I said, it was such a gift to be able to have that audience on you. When Craig and I did it in Santiago, it was a wonderful experience as well. But it was the traditional proscenium experience, which is, there's space in between you and an audience. I much prefer doing it in your theater.
Well, we appreciate hearing that. We all love our theater very much. We consider it our greatest asset, I think, and one of the things that makes our company special. We like to hear it when singers and artists and directors respond in that way. Kristine, let me ask that same question to you, but from your lens. About approaching a piece like this that we're so used to seeing in a large house, and the opportunity from building the ship on up to creating an intimate experience with this piece, a chance to look at it in a different way. What did that mean to you, and how did you approach your work in thinking about this piece in this space?
I mean, one of the things that working in the theater at DMMO does is it transforms every piece that you do. It actually becomes sort of a different version of itself than the proscenium house version that people have seen. So whatever impressions people might have of how the characters in Billy Budd interact or what they feel about them becomes very, very different when you're simply that close to them. It tends to humanize characters, but it also brings cruelty and viciousness to the audience in a different way. And so as the director, you have to be aware of that and helping to shape performances that take full advantage of that. So for instance, thinking about a character like Claggart, he's somebody that would be easy to dismiss as purely evil if a production wanted to go that way. And when you have a lot of distance physically between the audience and that sort of a character, it can lend itself to either misinterpretation or over-characterization that way. But Zach and I talked a lot about what it was going to mean to have the audience right there as he's doing his monologue, and what potential that gives us to make a character more complex and to sort of peel back the layers of the onion.
What hope remains if love can escape?
That was a unique opportunity. But at the same time, then, when you see somebody being vicious, and especially when we're doing something that involves physical violence, it's actually very hard to hide on the stage at DMMO. You have to be very careful in terms of how things are staged. But also knowing that the audience is right there makes all of those things reverberate in a different way. So it just heightens everything. It creates a lot of physical challenges in terms of on and off and where you can put people and all of that. But if what you want is a crowded scene to look crowded, there's nothing better than the having 70 people in the battle scene of Billy Budd in a really, really small house to make the point about what it's like to live on a ship like that. So in some ways it does its work for you, but having the audience on three sides also creates a lot of interesting issues in terms of sightlines and my constant job of keeping things open enough that everybody in the audience can see. You have to acknowledge as a director that not everyone in the audience is always going to see the same thing, and you have to make your peace with that very early on. And so do the singers, that everywhere they look is audience, that there's no such thing as the rules that we use in the proscenium house just don't really work the same way at Des Moines. But they open up, it alleviates some issues and creates new ones for us to be really thoughtful of. And one of the first things I do for anybody who's new to the space is on the day when we're doing our book work, we take a field trip to the theater so that they can understand immediately the challenge that we have in terms of creating drama in the 360, which is just not something that we get the chance to do so many times in the opera world.
Absolutely, and brilliant job of that. I think the way that the production was conceived was far beyond anything I could have ever expected in our space, in such a small space, and made it seem so perfectly natural. Still astounded by it. Another special memory for me. I work pretty hard in conjunction with Kristine and Maestro Neely to pull together just the right cast and then watch them meet one another through the course of the rehearsal process. And I remember cast members coming down the stairs from the upstairs talking about, did you hear that guy? Did you hear that singer? Oh my gosh, who was that? As people got to know each other for the first time. And something that stands out to me is something that happened later on, a little bit later in the rehearsal process, when the big moment came when Dennis's character read the charges against Billy Budd towards the end of the scene, and all of the young artists and other principals came down and said, oh my gosh, did you hear that guy upstairs? Who is that? And of course they were talking about Dennis Jesse.
You are condemned to death by hanging from the yard.
What a fabulous singer and artist you were. I'll never forget that moment. We know that this was a piece was special for everyone involved. I remember people, after cast members after the show was over, kind of embracing one another and with tears in their eyes to see it go. Dennis, what was that experience like for you as a performer with that big cast and spending so much time together with so many shipmates and getting to know one another? What was that like for you, and how was it to say goodbye to people at the end?
I've been in the biz a long time. I have a thick skin, I think, when that comes around. I've done it so many times in my life, but for this production, I don't know, it was very difficult for me to walk away at the end. I just wanted to go on forever. I was lucky enough to do the show again, and the costume that I wore, the officers' costumes, came from this production. And every time I put it on, while the second cast I love being with as well, I always harken back to this production and how special it was for me, and just a lifelong goal to be in the show. It's hard to walk away, but we all stay abreast of each other on Facebook, and I know if I ran into anybody from the show on the street, it would be such a joyous moment.
It was a very special moment for very many people, I think. It was something I won't soon forget. I'd like to close our time out here together, asking each of you to give us a little bit of an update about what you've been doing since we've been together. I can't believe it's been as many years as it has been, but we'd like to know what you've been up to, some personal and professional highlights. Craig, what have you been up to since Billy Budd?
Well, the silver lining with quarantine is that getting what we normally don't get as opera singers is lots and lots of time with family, which has been a huge blessing. Besides that, doing homeschooling with my daughter, and I learned how to bake with a natural sourdough starter like everybody else, and been doing gardening and making lots of wonderful meals with my wife, and I learned how to weld, and I'm restoring a 1974 Toyota Land Cruiser, rebuilt the engine. So I can't sit still. So I've been doing a lot of little things around the house, and a lot of fun projects. Can't wait to get back to singing though.
Zachary, this has been a really big year for you with the Metropolitan Opera debut and several career highlights. Even since we've seen you last here at DMMO, can you give us a little bit more about some of your professional highlights here in the last couple months?
Yeah, sure. It was a big year making my Met debut with Akhenaten, a Philip Glass opera that I've done 4 times now between London, LA, and New York. It's a really wonderful experience. And but I have to say, the last 3 summers in Des Moines were just as important, returning for Flight and Rusalka and Wozzeck, and just wonderful experiences. And to call Des Moines Metro Opera my summer home has been really wonderful.
Thank you. Roger, it's always interesting to see what you're up to, which is almost always something unconventional or unexpected, which I appreciate very much. What have you been up to since Billy Budd?
Well, I think a year ago, it might be tonight or tomorrow, I made my debut at Covent Garden, and that was super exciting. I was doing War Was Good Enough. And then after that, I went straight from that to singing The Phantom of the Opera. Now that was a bit of a switch. It was great though, great fun. And then of course, since the lockdown has happened, I've been spending a lot of time at home with my family, which has been terrific. And like Craig, I've been baking a lot. And because I've been baking a lot, I've been running a lot. It's been a sort of calorie in, calorie out kind of thing. And now I kind of figure, I don't even think about how many miles, it's how many butter tarts I run. That's about it. Going back and forth between my house and our cottage up north, and lots of maintenance, and waiting for the theaters to open up, hopefully soon.
Well, we look forward to seeing you in Des Moines sometime soon again.
I hope so.
Dennis, how are things in Baton Rouge?
Everything is great. I have done everything from a Disney musical up to Trovatore I was in when the lockdown happened. And I'll say my garden is on point. My landscaping is on point this year because, as I think many of us, we complain when we're busy, and then we complain when we're not busy. So I'm starting to get back into the groove and working on some recording projects, and just sort of coming out of the funk of not having anything to do.
And Kristine, what have you been up to since we saw you last? I know we were to have seen you here this summer with Sweeney Todd. We'll see that sometime soon, we think. But what have you been up to since Billy Budd, anyway?
Well, I've directed 5 more shows at DMMO since Billy Budd, so which I just added it up. It's a little crazy. The biggest thing I did right after Billy Budd that sort of relates to it is that I went on to direct Jake Hagee and Gene Shear's Moby Dick 4 times. Billy Budd was the beginning of what I called my year with Melville. So I remain the only person ever to have directed both operas based on Melville novels. I think it's a dubious distinction, but I certainly know a lot more about Melville than I did when I started out the whole thing. So big projects like that, and then small things, both at DMMO and elsewhere. I actually scored a big block of yeast early on in the quarantine. So unlike you poor sorry sops that have been baking sourdough with starter, I get to do it the real way, which has been exciting. Yes, my garden too is looking great, and we have a new cat that is a right holy terror. So that's good. And my husband and I haven't killed each other yet, even though we're both working at home in a fairly small house, which is actually quite delightful. So, looking forward to being back in the rehearsal room. Can't actually imagine doing something like Billy Budd at this particular moment, because all of the projects that are in my future are about small, socially distanced casts. But looking forward to a point when we can all be back on ships like the Indomitable.
I was just thinking, we have so many bakers. I don't know if there were any bakers on the Indomitable or not, but we certainly have that skill covered. That's for sure.
Yes, we'd have really great hardtack. We could make our own. I remember actually the prop crew had to make it for Craig to eat. Was it terrible, Craig?
It was not the best thing ever. I'm glad progressed.
Oh, well, thank you all for being with us today and for sharing these memories. It's wonderful to catch up on a production I know that was so meaningful for all of us and for me especially. Congratulations on everything that you've been up to, and we look forward to seeing you all in person again very soon. So thank you all.
Thanks, Michael.
Michael.
Thank you.
Wonderful seeing everybody. Miss you all.
I know.